Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen, creative people and what they do. I think that stuff really matters. I think it makes life bearable, especially during the tough times. So I like to lift people up who are putting themselves out there and using their creativity to create things. And today my guest does a lot of things very well. Her name is Frankie Frankeny, and she is the author, along with John Casey. Okay. Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen. Creative people and their projects. It's what I love to talk about. I think those things make life worth living, make the tough times bearable, and heaven knows we're in one of those tough times now. Today my guest is Frankie Frankeny. She's a writer and a photographer. She does a lot of things very well. She is also the primary author, along with John Casey, of a beautiful new coffee table book called Love, the Heroic Stories of Marriage Equality. It's a Rizzoli book, so you know it's gorgeous. It is so comprehensive. It's the whole story of the marriage equality movement in the United States through these different couples that we meet. And the photographs are beautiful. Just everything about it is gorgeous. And I've never been married. I've never come close. And it's never been a cause that's like particularly close to my heart. But as I was reading this, I was so moved by it. I was so galvanized by it. And it's going to be an issue again. And as scary as that is. But this book reminds us that people fight and people win and people prevail. So I was very excited to talk to Frankie. But before we get to the interview, I want to remind you that if you like this podcast, there's a few ways you can support it. And one of them is to become a member of my Patreon group or my Substack group. I have a second podcast that I do on there called Dennis Hensley's Happy and Gay. It's similar to this one. I talk about pop culture and creativity and things that I do and see and go to. But there's an element at the end about happiness, a topic I'm very interested in, the science of it, what makes people happy, how you can be happy when things aren't exactly going your way. What are the tools that I've used that help? I just find the subject really interesting. So that's a part of it. And you can learn about that at Substack or Patreon. Just search Dennis Hensley's Happy and Gay. And right now, all of the content on both of those sites is free through June. And then it'll be a mix of paid content and free content. Check it out. I'm really enjoying doing it. And it's a fun thing. So the other thing you could do is consider becoming a subscriber to DNR Studios. I'm part of the Derek and Romaine podcast family. So for a monthly fee, you get my show early and you get all these other great shows. So learn about that at dnrstudios.com. And if you want to drop a tip in my virtual tip jar, a one-time thing, you can go to dennisanyone.net. And you'll see a virtual tip jar tab there. And there's a thing there called Buy Me a Coffee where you can just buy me a coffee. And there's also a place where you can leave a virtual tip. All right, enough of the plugs. Let's get to the interview. Here is Frankie Frankeny, the driving force behind the gorgeous new coffee table book, Love, the Heroic Stories of Marriage Equality. Joining me now from Lufkin, Texas, it is Frankie Frankeny. She is the guiding force behind this wonderful new coffee table book called Love, the Heroic Stories of Marriage Equality. It is gorgeous. You do a lot of the writing. You do some of the photography. And I understand you've been involved in this cause or this project for decades. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So I'm a photographer by trade. And so a culinary photographer.
I've seen your Instagram. It is mouthwatering.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
But so in San Francisco, where a lot of this was happening, I started to notice after Hillary and Julie Goodridge won the right to marry in Massachusetts, and my friends were simultaneously being given refunds for their marriages. The first time Gavin Newsom, then the mayor of San Francisco, opened up the chapel doors for us to get married.
Right. I remember that.
That was kind of quickly shut down. But, so many of my friends were truly heartbroken. And, they had weddings and friends came and they had honeymoons, those that could squeeze it in. And, people came from everywhere. And, it was a lot. And I think it was at that time I really started to pay attention to the stories. And, my fiance at the time, we started Just Married, One Couple Courting Marriage Equality.
Right.
And we were telling our story just as an effort to, get these stories out there, just of everyday people. And I just continued to collect the stories. And I had hoped this would be sort of a celebratory book around 2020 for the 5th anniversary of marriage equality. But COVID sort of put a wrench in that.
Sure.
But in the end, it all turned out, I think, for the best. I ended up getting, my dream publisher, Rizzoli. They were at the top of my list. And I'm being a culinary photographer. I'm also a big fan of big, gorgeous books.
It is gorgeous. Your book is gorgeous. The quality of the paper and all the different photographs and just the way it's put together. It's really, you did a fantastic job.
I give a lot of credit to William Locasano. Bill, he did the design for the book. And as soon as I found him, I knew he was the one. I mean, he just had such a classic style and just a beautiful way of presenting all of his design. And it was a flawless process working with him. And I hope to get to work with him again.
All right. It's good to hear. It's always nice when that works out. As I was going through it, I was remembering, that case. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, that was domestic partners before that was like, you kind of remember the timeline because you kind of get it all, you get it all confused. And I want to talk about specific moments, but in general, as you were working on this, were there stories you hadn't heard of? Did you learn new things as you were researching it?
For sure. And still today, people email me and they tell me their story. And so, which we hope we'll be able to work into the podcast. So we have a serialized podcast launching at the end of June, and they go deeper into the stories. We have more time, clearly, than the coffee table book would allow. And we'll be able to go through to today. And so I'll be able to bring in more stories, and we're also launching a global Substack, and those are user-generated stories that we will curate. But I think that really opens it up for so many more stories to come in because there are so many. And I just tried to it was hard to whittle it down to be some 100 stories that are in here. But I tried to keep it to the voices that I felt really made a difference, whether it was a court case like Edie Windsor's or Chris Perry and Sandy Steer, any of these people, Jim Obergefell, of course, but also people whose stories changed maybe a state, like Kelly Glossop and Dennis Englehart. Their story has stuck with me throughout this, and these are all triumphant stories in my mind, in my heart. They're all triumphant. This one, it was a triumph because, the state of Missouri stood up and paid attention.
Yeah.
For them, it was rather tragic.
Remind me of the specifics of their story.
Well, so they were together for 15 years, Dennis and Kelly, raising a son. And Dennis was a corporal in the Missouri, he was Missouri State Trooper.
Yeah.
And they celebrated their anniversary every year on Christmas Day.
Nice.
And, this would have been their 15th partnership anniversary. And they did exchange rings. But Dennis had to work that Christmas Day. So he switched. They celebrated on Christmas Eve instead, and Dennis died on Christmas Day. He was killed helping somebody on the side of the road.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and Dennis was so well liked among all of his colleagues. The governor lowered the flag to half mast, and the hundreds of state troopers came out to his funeral, to his memorial. But in the end, they ended up denying Dennis the pension that he needed to help take care of, their house and their car and stuff like that. And he ended up having several strokes. And in my mind, he died from a big broken heart.
A broken heart.
Yeah. And he really only had the support at the time of the Bible group that they used to go to and where they originally met.
Yeah.
And what I feel like also the book is a collection of really diverse stories.
Yeah.
We have stories of pretty much, such a wide variety of age, race, religion, gender identity, socio and political, backgrounds. And so I think there's a story in here for everybody. And I hope it reminds people not just, why we fought for the over 1,138 rights, privileges, and protections of federal marriage equality, but how we did it.
Yeah.
And, Karen Thompson, who I met in college when she was touring to tell people about her story.
Right. You write about that in the acknowledgments. So that was an early moment. Yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, I actually wandered. I was at the University of Houston, so I was raised outside of Austin,
right.
in a small. And I went to University of Houston, and I wandered into her talk and heard her talking about having, trying to get her love back home. Karen and Sharon had exchanged rings, and then Sharon became quadriplegic in a car accident. They exchanged rings at a home together. They were together.
Right.
But they were in the closet. And that when the parents found out, when Sharon's parents found out, they removed her engagement ring. They dumped her into a rest home, and they refused all contact between and it took Karen 9.5 years to get Sharon back home. And she did. And along the way, she did so much for disability rights, for partnership rights. And also, when she toured the country, she was teaching people from 1987 to 1993 and beyond about the need for legal paperwork. So this is the height of the AIDS crisis. And they were on like Sally Jesse Raphael and Donahue.
All the big shows of the era.
Yeah. And it made a difference. People didn't know about legal paperwork and so that's what I hope that this book ultimately does is, well, first of all, give us the heroic history that we never had. We didn't have any history. And, really growing up, I wasn't even taught about Gertrude Stein and Alice Toklas or Harvey Milk for that matter.
Right.
So, I hope this gets in a lot of schools, a lot of libraries. We have a free book program where we're sending books via organizations on the ground like SAGE and Family Equality, so we can get it into the hands of, people who lived it that maybe can't afford it, and young people and young kids. I hope that will, find these stories empowering and realize that, we fought presidents, politicians, the Pope, and the public opinion in the past, and we won, and with a lot less allies and with a lot less support.
Yeah.
So, we can do it, and they need their heroes. They need to know, any disenfranchised group needs to know their heroes and how they did it and how they persevered, and that our history has been silenced and hidden. And for me, what I came to realize putting this all together is that it's a collection that doesn't exist anywhere. Yeah. And I would love to have had it growing up. And I hope that via our free book program and the podcast, and hopefully eventually a docuseries, which we have in development, I think it's pretty awesome. I hope that these stories will reach everybody, and do the job that they could have done had we been taught our heroic history, and had kids been, kids who are 20 and 30 been taught their heroic history.
Yeah. What struck me over and over again is these are just people. They get thrust into court cases. They get thrust into public spectacles. They get thrust into the media. They're just regular folks. And they have to kind of step up in a way. And they do. That's what I thought really moved me, because they're not, they weren't activists necessarily, and they became in the middle of things, and they're just like, I'm going to fight for this, and I'm going to step up. I found that very moving over and over again.
Sure. Even of all these stories, there are only two couples that I would consider activists. Stuart Gaffney and John Lewis. They were activists during AIDS crisis.
Right.
But also Stuart's parents weren't allowed to get married until he was 6 because they were biracial.
Yeah.
And also Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin, they certainly, they would have to be considered activists, at least for lesbians.
Yeah.
And women.
Yeah.
So, but most everybody just said no more.
No more. I mean, we're going to fight for this. What do you remember about 2015 when it became legal? Where were you when that happened?
I was in San Francisco in my photo studio. I was on the deck. So I had a big rooftop deck and lots of plants and stuff.
Right.
Stuff. And I just remember sitting in a chair and thinking, wow, I remember watching Jim over and over again, the picture of him pulling the picture up of John and putting it to his chest. I knew that he wished that, he could have been there, that they could have been there together. I mean, that was a moment. And then just the joy and elation from just everybody, the crowd, just the tears, it kind of reminded me, I know this is weird, but it kind of reminds me. I mean, I feel like pretty much everybody, aside from a very lucky few people, cry when they come out, whether it's just a relief.
Right.
Or whatever it is, whoever they're telling,
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like it was those kind of tears, like it was like finally, like just such a, I don't know, now that I think about it, I mean, and all these years later, what having, 3/4 of our country now say it's okay that, 70% believe that we should have marriage equality.
Yeah.
For me, what that says to me is that the outside community who's 70% saying this is definitely, you should have this. It says, we're sorry for everything that you went through. We believe you deserve this. And to me, it's the approval is sort of an apology, and maybe that's just how I'm taking it.
No, I mean, it makes sense to me. That tracks emotionally. I want to talk about a few of the individual things. There was something, there was a document, a letter that was sent, I believe, to Richard Frank Adams. Mm-hmm. And I'm just, this is right when I got the book, and I'm flipping through it, and I see this document, and then I read down, and there is a sentence on it that was written by a government official. Mm-hmm. And this is what the sentence said. I wrote it down. You have failed to establish that a bona fide relationship can exist between two faggots. That was typed by a government official. Mm-hmm. And it just was like, it struck me in my tracks. Remind me a little bit of the context of that and the individual case. And there was, and that sentence led to something. It became a factor, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, probably not the best person to speak on this, but, well, first of all, I just want to make a note that there was debate about whether to put that, letter in the book.
Yeah.
Just because, we want this in schools and, they're just banning everything for just saying, much less having the word faggot in it.
Right.
But it's history of what we went through.
Yeah, it shows. You feel it. It's a visceral thing.
Yeah,
it's powerful.
The animus was real, and and in a lot of ways, I feel like there's parts of our society that feels very comfortable being out with that type of animus right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that I'm glad we ended up putting it in there. Even if it means it won't get into, certain places or it gets banned from certain places. But, it's the truth, and it's the truth that, that they persevered. I think what's unique about their story is that when they ended up appealing their story, because they're a binational couple.
Yeah.
And they couldn't really go back to Australia, where Tony was from, because there was a lot of safety concerns living in Australia at the time. It just really wasn't very safe for queer people. And so the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled against them, and essentially, if they wanted to stay together, they had to exile. They had to leave the United States and go to live somewhere that they didn't know. Thanks to the support of friends, they kind of traipsed around Europe for a little bit via train, and they ended up in Ireland, I believe. But it was Anthony Kennedy who banished them. And
ironically. Yeah.
So he ended up being the fifth swing vote, in Obergefell that gave us marriage equality. So, I mean,
Interesting.
But in the end, Tony, it ended up Richard passed away in 2012, but Tony ended up getting his green card status as a widowed spouse of an American citizen. So he was able to stay. And that was in 2016. And so that case did set precedent for other people.
Right.
But their case was, their story was, truly, truly amazing. And they boldly went out there and did what they had to do to try to stay together. And in the end, they raised a whole lot of awareness for the issues surrounding gay people and immigration.
Yeah, it's interesting. Did you notice through these stories that people felt, because once they were in the spotlight, they felt pressure to be a good couple, to get along, they feel like they have to be perfect, right?
Sure, that's what ended up, I think that it ended up hurting, Hillary and Julie Goodridge.
Yeah.
It was too much pressure on them to just be the perfect couple.
Yeah.
And they had to do it all day long, and it just put a lot of pressure and strain on their relationship. That's actually more common. I know more than a handful of couples who just didn't make it through the fight for marriage equality because it's tough.
Right. You end up at the end of the day just exhausted, and you're not really connecting, and it's a lot to put on your
or
life.
then you go home and you talk about that. And so, it was tough for so many.
Remind me a little bit of the specifics of the Goodridge story.
Well, with the Goodridges, they were together for quite some time, since the 80s. And
they chose that name together, the Goodridge name. Yeah, which is sweet. Yeah.
And but they mainly wanted to get married because their daughter, Annie, she, asked why weren't they married if they love each other?
Yeah.
Why weren't they married? And then there was a hospital scare where one of the mothers wasn't allowed into the room, and because they didn't have the right paperwork. And, so they fought for it and they won.
Yeah.
And Annie's will be part of our podcast. We have a lot. This is one thing I really like about the podcast, is that we're able to bring in a lot of the children.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's because they're all adults now. Yeah. So we have there was a lovely couple in San Francisco during Prop 8, a first year preschool teacher. She got married, and the parents decided it would be a great teaching experience. So the kids were opted in. So there was an opt-in. I think only 2 parents opted their kids out. They didn't go to the wedding, but they stood outside City Hall in blue bubbles and threw rose petals.
Right.
Okay, but then the right got a hold of this and turned it into indoctrination, and teachers indoctrination, all the stuff they ran.
And the images were everywhere; they were used.
Oh, yeah, that was Aaron and Carrie Carter McCoy there in the book, and so it was pretty devastating for them. And but Chava, one of the kids, she's going to be who was in that class that threw the petals, and is now in college, so she's going to be telling their story. So, and there's another couple who had twins, Jay Mercado, Shirley Tan and Jay Mercado. They're Mercados now, both. And so their twins will be telling their story. So we're able to bring a lot of these adults in. I mean, that were children back then.
That were part of the story.
And they're more than all right.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah, I bet they have wonderful memories and perspectives, and it'd be great to hear from them. The Goodridge story, reading it in the book, was the one time I burst into tears reading your book. I'm an easy cry, but it was the moment in the diner. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. When the waitress.
Tell the story. I think they had broken up already, right? But they were in a diner together. Is that right?
Yeah. So they were. Yeah. So I believe that Annie was already grown or close to grown. She was in her teens, right. But they were in a diner, and the waitress came up to them and just said how proud she was of them, and because of them, she's proud to show her wedding pictures. You know, she feels safe, to show her wedding pictures to her friends and family and people. And I believe she actually showed them.
I think they were showing them the wedding pictures, and it's just the irony that they're not together anymore as a couple, but this road that they helped pave, this younger person was able to be more free. I've been to a handful of gay weddings. They're very beautiful. The last one I went to, what struck me about it was that it felt the same as any other wedding. There wasn't the aunt that didn't want to come, or there were kids running around. I was like, oh, this is a wedding. Like something shifted. It felt just like a wedding. And I don't know if it was because of the people involved and the families involved, but it didn't feel like activism or something. It felt just like a wedding, like you would see in a movie or you've been to a million times, right? And it was interesting because I talked to the couple afterwards, and they were so moved by it because they never thought it would happen. They didn't think they were going to have this, and I don't know. It's just a signpost of where we were, at least. I'm sure you've been to a lot of weddings. What strikes you about it as time has unfolded?
Well, I think, just because I'm so deep into this project, and I think that the people we see how fragile our rights are.
Yeah. And
how, that it's so important that we protect them. It's just, one only has to look at Roe v. Wade.
Right. They're coming for it. They're like, for a while, they're like, they're not coming for it. No, they're coming for it.
Yeah, they are. I mean, there's a big article on the front page of the New York Times today, too, talking about how the Southern Baptists are now putting together a resolution to help overturn Obergefell. So, I mean, and there are 10 states now that have, petitioned the court to overturn Obergefell. So, yeah, for sure, they're coming for that and a lot of other things.
I want to talk about some of the events that are in your book that I don't remember. I never knew about happening, but they were interesting. A mass wedding in 1987. Where was this?
It's funny. I think that woman who's leaning over to kiss the other woman looks like Cynthia Nixon reincarnated her in a previous life. Next time you check out
I flip through the book and I'll look for it. Yeah.
Just during my research, I found, some of these things. And again, like so many of these things are just piecemeal. They're just hidden in somebody's article from the 70s or the 80s, or you happen to run across it in the Library of Congress or something. So, it was just doing
San Francisco or New York? Where was it?
Oh, no, that was Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And it was 1987. There was a big protest. I'm trying to remember if it was a Pride. It may have been actually during Pride. I can't remember exactly the point, but about several thousand people broke off and marched to the IRS building to have this, this mass wedding to protest them not having, the 1,138 rights, privileges, and protections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite detail of that was that they all sang Madonna's Open Your Heart, which was very 1987, very cutting edge at the moment. And it has a wonderful message because that's what we want. You write about this caravan in 2004 of these couples, right? They were. Where were they going? Remind me of what that was.
They went around the Midwest, from what I remember, and they went by bus And they went to just different cities and they just talked to people. They were just regular people like Stuart and John that I previously mentioned, but so many other couples that were part of Marriage Equality USA and Freedom to Marry. And they, they all probably were members of all of those organizations, but, and they just talked to people and they just told them their story, their lives. They weren't anybody famous that anybody knew. And they were just real people talking to real people. And again, for me, that moved a lot of people. These stories did, and in my mind, that's the only thing that's ever changed the public's mind. It's the only thing that's ever changed, politicians' mind is when the public's mind changes. Yeah. And courts, these stories were used in courts for reasons because they each, in their attempts, whether they won or not, were telling why we need these rights. Yeah. And each and every story in our project does represent one of these 1,138 rights, but they all represent our desire for dignity.
Yeah, humanity.
Yeah, and now, we have a generation of children who were able to grow up dreaming the same dreams as their classmates. Yeah, from childhood to dating. And so to me, that's amazing. That's beautiful. Even if they didn't feel comfortable in their small town saying that they had that dream, they knew that they could in their heart. And to me, that's the biggest, most beautiful, most wonderful thing and we need to protect that.
Yeah. Other people are doing it somewhere. I can do it someday. There are mystery photos in your book, I think from 1957, that was like somebody put the film but never picked it up. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I was like, this is fascinating.
Yeah, well, that one I just found actually as we were, finishing putting the book together. Again, these things pop up, but yeah, somebody, took these pictures and to a photomat, but they were too afraid to go back and get them.
And it was like a wedding that they had staged, or it was either something that they saw as real or as a kind of, I don't know, acting thing but they had a wedding.
Yeah. And so I don't remember actually the details but what I think is somebody from the photomat brought them home and their child found the box. Right. With pictures in them. But it was just a random person that worked there who decided
they were noteworthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we still don't know who they were, as far as I know. There's an organization that's trying to figure it out, but and who knows how many there are of those. I mean, I think that's why we put the Invisibles book in there by Rizzoli, and also Neil Hunini and Treadwell's book Loving in there, because these were the beginnings. These people couldn't talk about their relationships, but for them, having that picture said to them, we exist. Yeah.
I had Hugh and Neil on the podcast when that book came out, and it was those images are just so powerful because you could just see the love. It's, okay, they're a couple, they're together. Donahue had a gay wedding on his show in 1990. No, is that right? 1990. Yeah. Uh-huh. He was kind of cutting edge and doing things like that. Did you watch the tape of it? Does it?
Oh yeah, and we tried to get a still to put it in the book.
What was it like?
It's possible to get the rights in such a short amount of time, but it was great. I'll send you a link.
Oh, fun.
Yeah,
but they took it seriously. It was like, 'cause he was always very progressive and
it was very serious. Yeah. And the audience, I think the audience, he attracted an empathetic audience, I think, in general. Yeah. It was, a lot of women who went there to learn and understand the world around them, I think. And the audience in that and other ones that I've seen, theirs was more of curiosity and wonder than anything else. I mean, I didn't see any ugly faces or anything like that I remember.
Nobody threw anything.
No, not like that. I mean, there may have been like looks, like when they kissed or something like that. But, you know, a lot of people back then had never seen two men kissing. So,
yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff was just happening in the 90s, you know.
Something else I found very moving in your book is you write about Evan Wolfson, who's been described sort of as the architect of marriage equality, the Harvard graduate lawyer. His thesis at Harvard was about marriage equality, and you include some of it. You include the final sort of page, and I just want to read a little of it because it's very emotional. It doesn't feel like a dry legal term paper thesis. It feels like an emotional appeal, and I'm just going to read a little of it that I marked. Refusing people same-sex marriage denies them the opportunity to develop their loving selves and contributes to negative perceptions and feelings about gay people. Gay individuals, like society as a whole, lose faith in their ability to develop personal relationships and in their capacity to love. The resultant alienation often takes on a political cast as well, as gay citizens on some levels reject the society which rejects them. Deprived of stable shelter, perhaps even more essential to them than those conforming to majority standards, gay people often stand exposed and alone. Like, it's very emotional. Like, he's talking about how it feels, right? I just was struck by that, that was, that he was so interested in it that he made it his thesis, and that he went beyond, like, fairness or whatever to talking about the way it feels in the hearts of people. Were you struck by that as well? I was surprised at how it almost feels like a philosophy book or a psychology book and not a dry, Harvard thesis.
Yeah, I don't know, because I've read it so many times and I've heard Evan speak so many times, and it's really the essence of who he is.
Right.
He just, like a lot of people, I think, in this project, there's a core belief inside that we're as good as anybody else.
Right.
And, I definitely, we've all had to, come out and get to a place where you feel comfortable enough saying that all the time.
Yeah.
Of course. But I think that a lot of these people went through something as children.
Right.
That gave them the kind of the superpower, if you will, or the skills anyway, to fight for marriage equality later on in life, whether it's growing up Jewish or, Jack Baker grew up in an orphanage, and I think he went in at like 6 years old. And so he learned so much how to navigate, the orphanage.
Right.
And I think he used those mad skills, to maneuver the legal system, which ultimately gave him and Michael the first, legal LGBTQ plus marriage license in the world.
Right. Because they were doing some cunning, strategic form application things. It was kind of like a caper, like a paper caper.
Totally. Yeah, he got a law license, because Michael said, I'll marry you as long as you find a way to make it legal. So, Jack was like, all right, game on. He got they did what they thought was legal and they were turned down. Turns out 50 years later it was legal, but they kept going and they went and got another license in a county that only one of them had to show up. And Jack changed his name to a gender-neutral name, Pat Lynn McConnell.
Right.
And so they were able to, so the person just thought, well, fine, gave them their license. And, they did a lot.
Yeah.
He adopted each other. I mean, Michael adopted Jack so that part was legal too. They did, they covered their bases, and in the end, they won. It
took a while, but they did. Talk to me about Gavin Newsom. I remember when he performed those weddings initially. What year was that?
2004.
2004. And I just remember I'm like, I'm always going to like that guy, you know, and he's had this political life since then. But I just remember like, it felt like, it was like, so it felt really audacious at the time to me from my viewpoint.
I think it was. And, it definitely was, you know, but being somebody from San Francisco, you know, and being raised, you know, in that area, you know, I think Gavin's a very empathetic person. And, you know, he never saw, you know, he always thought it was a load, if you will, that we couldn't get married.
Yeah.
And, you know, he put his money where his mouth is, if you will, you know, and he did it again in 2008. And, you know, and Kamala Harris, you know, was helped with that. And in the end, you know, Joe Biden, you know, coming out and helping, you know, Obama kind of get to a place that he needed to get. And also, you know, him being pro marriage equality. When, you know, Gavin got elected to governor and Biden Harris got elected to the highest offices in the land, they did so with a history, you know, of full support of our community and full rights.
Early.
And to me, that was, you know, they were elected with people knowing that. And that's the first time.
Yeah.
You know, and Obama didn't you know, come around until his second
term.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when Biden said that on Meet the Press and what a bombshell it was because Obama hadn't come out yet for it. And it was kind of a great moment. And it was influential. You have several photographs in the book. Do you have a favorite photograph in the book? Either yours or somebody else's? I'll tell you
I
mine.
really love, there's a second, as I mentioned with the letter, there was a second picture I wasn't sure if we should put in either, is the one that says stripped of human rights, and it's a woman that's walking down the street, and I shot it was right after Prop 8 passed.
Yeah.
And, you know, she was marching in like a pair of, you know, bikini shorts and a bra.
Yeah.
And, you know, it said stripped of human rights written on her. And I really liked that shot. Again, we were like, is this going to keep it from getting in schools? But I'm like, you know, she's wearing more than people in a real bikini wear. So I'm like, this is our history. Let's go for it.
Right.
I also love the one of the guy. This was also that evening, I believe, after I shot that picture of that woman. I have to go look. But anyway, so, you know, he's holding a U.S. flag and, you know, having fought, you know, for, you know, as a veteran, you know, to get, you know, for us to get these rights and, you know, put his life on the line. And his anger and his face, his rage, you know, that's what we were all feeling at the time. So those may be some of my favorite ones. There's other ones that just didn't make it in, which I'm sure they'll make it in other stuff. But like there's a shot of just a sign that says, you know, WTF SRSLY, and it's huge, you know, just in.
What is SRSLY?
Seriously, it's just WTF. Seriously, like, I mean, just, I don't know. You had to see the picture, but so, you know, also there's just, it feels all very relevant right now, the way that Prop 8 kind of galvanized our community, because people were like, what?
Yeah.
You know, no way did this happen in liberal California. And so I think it really galvanized the nation at a time when, you know, we really needed it.
I remember going to those marches, marching in front of the Mormon temple, which was interesting because I was raised Mormon. But I remember that whole time. And Obama had just won, and then Prop 8 had also passed. It was like this whiplash moment.
I call it yes, we can. Like, yes, we can. No, we can't.
Yeah, the worst. My favorite photo, I think, or the one that caught my eye is Edie Windsor in President Obama's office.
Yeah.
I think because I'd actually got to meet her once, and I always was inspired by her story. But there's something about the framing of that. He looks like a giant, and she looks very small. But they look. It's a fabulous photo, but it's sort of striking. Yeah, I like that. I want to talk a little bit about the cookbooks photography that you do.
Okay.
It's really cool and beautiful. What do you love about doing that? What's cool about it?
Well, I think after all these years, I really just love meeting all the people in the culinary world. They're such warm and empathetic and kind and caring people. I started out doing some fashion, but when I moved to San Francisco, I kind of realized that food was the fashion of San Francisco. So if I was
interesting.
And I loved the city and the people and everything. So I realized I kind of needed to switch over if I wanted to stay there and I'll go back to New York or go to LA. And you know, so I was like, well, I can bartend because I wanted to work on this film.
Right.
So I started just bartending to work on this film short. It was a film short about LGBTQ plus people in advertising or lack thereof, if you will. And and then I just realized, you know, I loved the California cuisine. I loved everything that was happening right then. This was early 90s. And so I went to work one night a week for Tracy Desjardins at Rubicon and one night a week at Plump Jack Cafe for Arnold Rossman. And I just fell in love with them and just their their attention to food and their love of food and just the entire community, you know, and just little experiences when, you know, you'd run out of pork chops and in the middle of, you know, and rather than 86 something, you know, somebody's like, call Mike over at so-and-so. See if they have extra. Yes, they do. They're sending some over for you. This is what that community's like. They're always fundraising for people. They're always helping. You know, they probably have to stop. They probably have to start saying no at like the second month of the year. That's how much they do.
Right.
And it's just I learned so much about food from them. And my grandparents were ranchers and farmers. So I had an appreciation for that, but I learned so much more by being around them and learned to love to cook. And I love photographing them, I think, even more than the food, because they're all such unique, beautiful people.
That's really interesting because the image that we get in the media is that it's a high pressure thing and people are yelling in the kitchen, and that's not your experience.
No, but I would have to say that because I worked in the majority of the kitchens that I did work in were female run kitchens, or B, males who worked in female run kitchens. So, you know, they tend to see it less as a military zone, and it's more of a nurturing experience. I think that's kind of a Bay Area thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, Alice Waters and just so many big, you know, Joyce Goldstein, or just so many of them, you know, were concentrated there.
Yeah.
So I think that had something to do with it. But, you know, because I did travel around the country shooting in different kitchens. And so it depends. But, I mean, it can be like that, certainly.
Sometimes, yeah. Well, the images that I've seen are beautiful, and you make the food look delicious, and it has an aesthetic that's really cool.
Thank you.
There's also a photo in your book of Don Lemon, CNN anchors, at his wedding with his dogs.
Yeah.
He had his dog, like 3 dogs, I think, between the 2 grooms, maybe. And I noticed in your acknowledgments, you love dachshunds. Oh,
yeah. I've had them since I was in the womb.
Oh, wow. I have a good friend that loves them as well. That's her breed. So, yeah, it reminded me of that. But you thank them for always being there for you.
Yeah, I came out to a wiener dog first.
Tell me, so you sat him down and you said, like, this is the story.
I think we were laying in bed, and I think I just said, I'm going to have a wife one day. So
yeah,
that was about the time when I was I knew I wanted to have a wife like Mary Poppins, and I was vocal about it. So,
and how did the wiener dog take it?
Oh, just fine.
Just cool with it. Did you have a wife? Do you have a wife?
Not right now. Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. I have not been married. I haven't particularly come close. But I think I would like to more that, the more, I guess the older you get, it's just nice to, there's so much uncertainty as you're starting to get older, and it'd be nice to have someone that was stuck with you. I'm realizing. Tell people how they can find out about your book and where they can get it, and anything you want to say around getting the book out there.
Okay, well, our free book program, which is I'm super excited about. Like I said, the books are going to people via organizations on the ground that can really get them into hands of people who really need them but maybe can't afford them. And they can go to love.justmarried.us/heroes and get a book for themselves or send a book to our free book program. All the purchases there help fund our free book program. And
what's the name of the podcast that's coming in?
It's Love, the heroic stories of marriage equality, and the Substack is Love Beyond Borders.
I love it. You've been working on this for so long. I think my final thought is this: what does it mean to you to have it out there now?
Well, ironically, or I don't know if that's even the right word, but it feels like it's coming out at the right time.
Yeah, I wanted to add on after I said that. I was like, now of all times, right?
Well, even 5 years ago, we were having a lot of trouble getting attention for the project.
Yeah.
But now it's overwhelming. I think people really can see, how important these stories are. I mean, they've always seemed important to me simply because we've had Harvey Milk, and that's pretty much all they've ever allowed us, and we have so many heroes. And I know this is sort of packaged around marriage equality, but it would have been an encyclopedia had I been able to include all of our people who, fought for our rights. But yeah, I hope that it does what I think that it's going to do and empower the next generations to know that we've been here before. We can do it again.
Right.
And empower the rest of our community, to go from fear to fierce.
Oh, I like it. That's gonna be the title of this episode, From Fear to Fierce. I love it. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for taking time on your weekend, and I hope that everyone picks up the book, and especially young people, schools. I hope a lot of people are able to enjoy and learn from what you've created. It's beautiful.
Oh, me too. And also, we are doing a 1-hour storytelling hour on the 24th of June.
Where at?
And it's a global streaming storytelling hour. So we are in the throes of putting it all together in conjunction with USA Prides and Enterprise, and SAGE and other family equality, other organizations. And the goal is to just get these stories out there to celebrate the 10th anniversary of marriage equality and pride, and be proud of who we are and where we've come from and how much we've done, and let people know we're not going back.
I love it. All right. How can people learn about that?
I'll send you information on that, but they can go to, if they want to stream the event at their home or at their venues. We have free events. They can do ticketed events and help us fundraise for our free book program as well. They can go to, it's justmarried.us/events25.
All right. I like it. Congratulations. It's really comprehensive and it's beautiful to look at and hold.
Thanks, Dennis.
All right.
I want it to be something that two lesbians in Tennessee or Tom Ford would be proud to put on their coffee table. So I hope that that's exactly what it is.
Thank you again. And good luck with everything with the book. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Frankie Frankeny. Pick up her gorgeous book, Love, the Heroic Stories of Marriage Equality, but use both hands because It's heavy and thick and gorgeous. You can also go to the website justmarried.us and learn more about the whole organization behind the book. All right. So this happened. You guys, I booked a dance job, a real one. It's exciting. I've had a couple of days of rehearsal, and next week we shoot it, and I signed a bunch of NDAs, so I can't say much more about it. A couple weeks ago, I got an email from my agent saying they wanted to submit me for this job, and so I had to do a self-tape, and those are always weird to do because you're by yourself, and you don't have a great place to do it. You're in your garage. It doesn't look that great. The lighting sucks. Like, you're always in your head about all that stuff. And I got it done at the last second, but I turned it in and did my best. And then I found out I was on a veil, which is where they say they're interested in you. It's not a sure thing yet, but don't book anything else, in terms of the dates that they talked about. And then I found out I got it. And it's been really interesting to have this experience. Like, I'm getting up to go to rehearsal, and I have to wear sweats, something I can move in. So I'm going to this place where my job is to use my 60-year-old body to create something artistic or, entertaining or whatever, because I can do that, because they believe based on that tape that I can do that. And I can do that, but it's just surreal, Like, I moved out here when I was in my 20s, and dance was one of the things I was pursuing most seriously. And I did a few things here and there. I worked on cruise ships for 5 years, but I was never like one of those dancers that were always working, and other things took precedence, and I was off to the races as a writer. But I'm doing this now, and I'm grateful for it because I needed the dough, and it's kind of an adventure. Everyone's been really nice. It's a big group. I was driving to the second day of rehearsal, and I was stopped at a red light, and I looked over to my left, and there was a bench with a picture of a young girl that says she wants to be a dancer when she grows up. And it was for this organization called Children's International, who I actually donate to every month. For a number of years, I had my own kid that I was sort of supporting, and she graduated high school, so I sort of changed the nature of my donation to something a little more in my budget. But it's been a charity that I've been aware of for years, and there that thing was, she wants to be a dancer when she grows up. I'm like, I guess she does. She does want to be a dancer when she grows up. So I'll let you know when I can tell you more about it. But it's just been a surprise, and there's been a lot of rejuggling things, commitments I had to move around because of this and stuff, but it's all working out, and I'm grateful for it. And sometimes you just gotta dance, I feel like I'm that guy a little bit. So there's that. All right, that's enough for this week. Thank you all so much for listening. I want to give a shout out to Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for Placement Music. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye.